Well, welcome back to the Cordell and Cordell Virtual Town Hall for December. I'm Scott Trout, Managing Partner and CEO of Cordell and Cordell. And today we're going to talk about the one bad thing about holidays, and that is divorce during the holidays or any really family law action, because likely, possibly you got bad advice from a friend, because we all have someone, family member, a friend that's has gone through divorce, and the advice that you get is not necessarily the right advice because every case is unique and different. The circumstances dictate something potentially different, and that result may impactful. So that's where we start with your advice may not be the best that you've received, and that's what we're here at least to try to give you some tips throughout today's virtual town hall. Again, keep in mind, this isn't legal advice. We can't provide that to you. We're going to be joined with a number of attorneys from Cordell and Cordell around the country. And obviously your case may not be in their state. And obviously we haven't met with you to get more details. If you'd like to schedule a consultation, go and do that by going to cordellcordell.com or scheduling an appointment by calling 866-DADS-LAW, 866-DADS-LAW. In the second half of our virtual town hall, we'll be taking questions from you to give you answers to those questions, or at least give you guidance and tips along the way. You want to submit those in the Q&A section. You can do that starting now, and we'll be watching that, and we'll address some of those questions. And want to do that with first name and the city or state that you live in. That way, if you happen to be in a city or state in which one of our panelists are in, I'll toss it to them and try to give you the best guidance possible. But start submitting the Q&A questions just right now, and we'll go ahead and log those in, and we'll get those in the second half of our virtual town hall, what we call the lightning round, where we'll be rapidly going through the list of questions. We have some submitted already, and we'll be going through those then. So let's get right to our panelists, introduce to you the attorneys from Cordell and Cordell. Let's start in New York with Asa. Welcome, Asa.
Hey, Scott, thanks for having me back. I'm Asa Neff. I'm an attorney in the Albany office. I've been practicing law for about 15 years, and with Cordell, the last 10 of those years, practicing exclusively in matrimonial law. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Let's go back to Arizona. Jessica's joining us again. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you, Scott. My name is Jessica America, as Scott mentioned, and I work in the Peoria, Arizona office, and I've been with Cordell for a little over 3 years doing exclusively domestic relations work.
All right, let's head over to Illinois. Marilynn, welcome.
Hello, thank you, Scott, for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Marilynn Dye. I'm a senior litigator in Springfield, Illinois, and my territory is anything from almost Chicago down to the very tip of the state. Been practicing law for 22 years. I'm new to Cordell, just here almost coming up on 2 years. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Well, great. Rounding out the panel of Cordell and Cordell attorneys, let's go up to Minnesota. Niecie, welcome.
Hi, Scott. My name is Niecie. I'm from our Edina office, which is close to Minneapolis. I have been working in the family law arena for about 15 years and with Cordell since 2017.
Great. Well, thanks all for joining and providing some of the tips and education I know guys need when we talk about the holidays. It's a rough time. We try to get through some of these topics to point you in the right direction and give you the support, and that's probably the most important thing. And we'll talk really right out of the gate talking about custody. That's a lot of the questions that guys have, especially now coming out of Thanksgiving and rolling into the holidays. So before we get to that, and we'll start up with Asa, but let's go ahead and take a real quick commercial break and we'll get to our first topic.
New school, new job, new home. Change is hard and can leave you feeling isolated. And divorce delivers one of life's hardest blows. The relationships you counted on are suddenly gone. But you don't have to walk through this alone. We can help. For more than 30 years, Cordell and Cordell has guided men through the challenges of divorce. You're not alone. Call Cordell and Cordell, a partner men can count on.
All right, Asa, let's go ahead and jump right to it. I know this is, I think, one of the things we get the most questions around any holiday, particularly towards the end of the year, leaning into the new year, and it is dealing with custody arrangements, whether there's a formal order, whether you are divorced, whether you're filed, or whether you're thinking about divorce. That's always the most difficult thing, is to juggle that. And let's start with the idea of, keeping it simple, right?
I agree, Scott. Custody during the holiday season can be extraordinarily stressful for everybody involved. The advice I give to my clients is try to stay as flexible as possible with the schedule and keep the children in mind first. The whole purpose of holidays is to be with your family, to be with your friends, and to really enjoy your time. And that's not always looking at a watch and counting the hours that the kids are with one parent as opposed to the other, because kids usually don't care. What they want is to have a good time and relax with their family. My advice to my clients is to remember that you're always in charge of your schedule. If you have something written and ordered from a court, that's a default. That's what you fall back on if you can't agree otherwise. But you're the adults and it's your family. And what you decide is most important is what you should do. So try to remember that you might be the one seeking flexibility next year and you should offer it this year and vice versa. I also advise clients who don't have an order yet to not wait. Now is the time that you should be reaching out, opening that dialogue and trying to come to some kind of an agreement so that's not a last minute thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, Hanukkah began and don't wait till Christmas Eve to start thinking about, am I going to get them on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day or New Year's? I know that a lot of times for guys going through stress or any human, it's avoidance, right? And it's, I don't want to even touch the subject till I absolutely have to, but I got to see that's kind of it's a recipe for disaster if you wait till the night before, let's say on December 23rd, hoping that you're going to get December 24th or anytime on Christmas. So, I guess open a dialogue right away.
I agree with that completely. Another thing to keep in mind is that, especially if this is new, this year is this year, but really look at the big picture. There's going to be holidays again next year. Whatever it is, this year is likely to be the opposite the following year. That's very common in New York, and my understanding, it's very common in most states to have something of an equal and opposite holiday schedule. So if the kids are going to be with the other parent on Christmas Eve this year, it's very likely in most situations that they're going to be with you Christmas Eve next year and vice versa. So try to keep that in mind and just remember that, the kids are going to hopefully have a great holiday season. And if you can just show a great deal of flexibility and look at the big picture long term, then you'll be able to get through it with them and everything will go just great.
The interesting thing is you think about whether you're divorced and you have an order, whether you're not, trying to figure out how do I engage my kids during a holiday season. And that's, we went through a terrible season in 2020 with COVID, where Zoom technology, WebEx, Microsoft Teams, you name it, FaceTime became the norm. We all became so intimately familiar with communicating with family and friends just like this. And so I think that's kind of the one thing I would think that you would want to focus on if you can't spend time with your kids, not ignore it and just hope for next year, right? But that is important to get the physical time, but to plan something, say, okay, you can have Christmas Eve, but can I, FaceTime them at 6 p.m. on Christmas Eve? And can I have a gift ready for them to have? And you can celebrate, albeit it's not the ideal, but that's the kind of planning, the improvisation, you overcome the obstacles that I would imagine are important.
It's interesting what happened with COVID, because with all the travel restrictions, we did see those issues come up more than is common in every other year. So people couldn't always be there face to face. But like you said, with the technologies that we have in place, you can still make it very special with the family. Scott, you mentioned setting a time, and I can't emphasize how important that can be. While being flexible is important, if you're not going to be there, you don't want to be so frustrated with not getting a call, nobody answering phones, that it can ruin it for everybody. So if you know you're not going to be there, setting a specific time and how it's going to happen. And like you said, sending a gift ahead of time to unwrap during that call can really make a special time for the kids and help you get through what's otherwise a difficult holiday season.
And I know we get fixated on the day, meaning December 24th or December 25th or January 1st or, the 31st, we're fixated on it. And the obstacles they're not unique to divorcing families, divorced families. And I use this as an example, is to focus on the time and not the day that you have the time. My daughter is a nurse and she lives out of state. And obviously you all can imagine Nurses are short-staffed, and so she has to pull extra shifts. And so she worked on Thanksgiving. She's going to be working on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, and I won't have a chance to see her. Didn't on Thanksgiving, won't on Christmas Eve or Christmas morning. But as I told her, I said, look, it's just a number, it's just a day. We can celebrate that event anytime. And so we'll find time after and to celebrate. And I think that's important for younger kids, albeit they get so fixated on that one moment in time, and trying to feel the dilemma is, how does a kid split their time with two parents on what's supposed to be a really fun, holiday season. So I think that has to be an important message, don't you think?
No, I try to emphasize with clients all the time. This comes up a lot when we're talking about birthdays, because you can't always split that day. If a child's birthday is during a school day, if they've got an activity, we're talking about a couple of hours. So when do you really celebrate somebody's birthday? It's usually the weekend before, the weekend after, wherever you're going to see them. And that's when it's special for the kids. That's what's important for them, is spending time with you and being able to have that celebration. And it doesn't have to be on the day. Christmas is no different. They're going to light up when they're with you. They're going to light up when they see they have, more presents and I get to do this again. They love that. And, not focusing and fixating on it having to be that day would really make that the whole holiday season go that much smoother.
Yeah, and I know we'll talk a little bit more about, trying to make certain things special. And I think that's so key when you, again, try to create a new, something new to do, a new event. And Niecie, let's talk about that, because obviously what we're just talking about, those things, those events, whether they do take place, and now it's different. The stress on not only parents, right, but kids is immense. And so simply divorce, separation, that all means change. And so things have to change, and your attitude and the things you do have to change, right?
Yes. I mean, if you could describe divorce in one way, stressful would be the way. The holiday time, even under perfect circumstances, is stressful for all. I mean, if we're honest with each other, holidays don't go perfectly when you're not getting divorced. So you toss in divorce and it gets more complicated. During this time, it's important to pay attention to your children. Make the time to really connect with them, and don't get caught up in the stress. You are the guiding light for your children, and that is especially true during the holidays. There's a focus on family and special events, and those will all be different for you while you're going through a divorce. But that doesn't mean it has to be negative. Make sure you take the time to be with your kids so that you can have conversations. If the children bring up the divorce and want to talk about it, have those conversations, but keep them really positive. Remind them they have two parents that love them very much. It's especially important for the children to know you support their relationship with the other parent during the holidays.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to be. I was just talking earlier about stress and the impact of one individual, not much less a parent, who shows physical, visual stress. Imagine what that does to your kids. And so it means prioritizing them. And also, we just kind of intimated in respect, the traditions that you've done. For example, maybe when you were a family unit together, you spent Christmas Eve at one place, and then you did Christmas on the other. But don't you think, I think it's more important now to start creating new traditions, something that the kids can get excited about, albeit you have a lot of change. This could be a positive change to create something new.
Certainly, Scott. As you're trying to work out holiday plans with the other parent, if you can stick to some of the same traditions, like Scott alluded to, having, Thanksgiving morning at mom's house, Thanksgiving evening with dad and his family, that's great. But if you can't, don't be afraid of new traditions. This is an opportunity for you to be the parent you have maybe always wanted to be, and due to challenges in your marriage, weren't able to. This is an opportunity to really connect with your children and do something different. Suggestions might be making Thanksgiving the day you decorate the tree. During divorce, you might not have a tree or the decorations. Go get a new tree, make decorations with your children. That might sound off. You might not be a crafty parent, but think of how much fun your children will have doing something with you they've never done before.
Yeah, I mean, to create that new event where they think, we've never done this. I mean, to me, these helpful tips like that is, you're not thinking about it. The last thing you're thinking about is recreating the wheel, trying to become organized when you probably weren't. There's this professional in Houston, and I was talking to her. Her job is to deal with divorced guys to help them become more organized about what do they need to do about shopping for groceries, shopping for clothes, arranging for a house, make sure it's clean. Now taking the kids to school, a world in which they may not have been involved in intimately. And this is just another example of trying to create something that's different, where the kids see a lot of change, you see a lot of change in your life, but it's a positive, which means more communication. I know that's a tough one, especially in times when things aren't going well. You're fighting a lot, perhaps you may be living separately. You got to communicate a lot and with detail, right?
Definitely. It's really important to keep those lines of communication open. You don't always have the opportunity to do that. You might be working with a co-parent that doesn't have that same goal, but that doesn't mean that you can't still model positive behavior and leave those channels open for communication.
So one of the things that I think is interesting is that we always talk to our clients, take holiday out of it. And that is, I always say, when you use social media, someone's watching. It could be the judge, it's opposing counsel, friends. They talk about your behavior, your statements. But in this instance, I saw something online that I thought was so appropriate for this topic, and that is, it's not just Santa checking the naughty list. And I thought, boy, that's catchy. And it was meaning that your kids are watching every move. They're watching how you handle it. They're watching what you do. The things that we talk about, excuse me, parental alienation. And that is mom saying, well, your dad wouldn't let me have Christmas. So, those types of things where it casts the other side in a negative light and it influences the kids and it can damage your case. So you have to be thinking, obviously, right, about what you say, what you do, how you go about it. Don't you think?
Yes, one of the first conversations I have with my clients whenever their children are involved is about communicating with their children. It is imperative you do not speak negatively about the other parent's family, or the other parent's friends to the children. With the holidays coming up, you may be able to control your communication and not to do it, but we all have mothers, we all have extended family members, and they also might be angry at the other parent. Before the holiday, make sure you have discussions with these third parties and set boundaries about communications. Make sure they know that the divorce is not something that they should talk about, and they should under no circumstances speak negatively of the other parent.
It's real easy for us. Before we got on, I said it's kind of a squishy, soft topic. We're talking a lot about emotions. We're talking about how to deal psychologically with these, but everything we're talking about does impact the case long term. You may be in the middle of a divorce, and as I mentioned, someone's watching. It's not just Santa. That could be used against you in court, in a custody battle, whatever you say to your kids. Your kids may repeat it to a guardian ad litem, whatever that may be. But I think what's interesting is guys are watching, they're thinking, what do I do? You see, what happens if my ex or my current separated spouse interferes with my holiday plans? Let's just say we had an oral agreement, no order, and I get Christmas morning, and somehow kids don't show up. The first reaction is to tell the kids what happened and why, because mom interfered. But that's just a no. And it not only for the emotional standpoint, I would think, but also for the strategic litigation, you don't want to do that.
Sure, Scott. Usually what I tell clients is the things that are good for your kids are also good for your case. The court is focused on the children and wants to see parents acting like adults. So while situations when your parenting time is denied or interfered with is frustrating, especially over the holidays, being the better person and following the golden rule is key. What I tell my clients is, if the other party interferes with your parenting time, don't let the children know. Be the protector of your children. Be their shield from what's going on between you and the other parent. The children aren't going to necessarily remember that your Christmas Eve got cut short, as long as you give them a big hug and a kiss and you send them out the door, even if it kills you inside. Just do the right thing and your kids will remember that positive experience. What children will remember is if the police get called to try to deal with a parenting time exchange. You should avoid those sorts of circumstances entirely. They're very bad for your children.
And I have to think, we talk about this in past virtual town halls, and that is keeping really good records of timelines, a day in the life. I always talk about keeping notes, a journal. Don't let something go if it's interfered. Just bring it to the attention of your attorney and let it be dealt with in court where it should be dealt with, not in an argument between you and your spouse, because you're not going to win. One of the reasons you're probably getting divorced is you argued and never came to a resolution anyway, and you keep arguing and you kept losing maybe. So the thing is, we're not suggesting to gloss over it and not do anything about it. I think it's excellent tip to say, look, don't let your kids know. And that's really what's important. And which kind of leads us to Jessica, holidays, separation. That is a terrible time. Especially, we've always talked about surrounding yourself with people and family and friends and getting the help where needed. But, for guys now that are watching, what do they do? How do they, what should they suggest to do with coping with separation over the holiday period?
Sure. Thank you, Scott. I know that this, especially if it's your first year being separated, it is probably going to be the hardest. After this, you kind of start to adjust and find, like they talked about, new traditions, new things to do, and expanding on old traditions, those sort of things. But you get into a routine, but the first year is really hard. And so give yourself some grace. Know that it's okay to not be okay. Anybody in that position wouldn't be feeling necessarily the holiday cheer and easily get into the festivities like you would maybe in prior years. So give yourself some time to adjust to that, and know that you're not alone in that, and reach out, surround yourself with the family and friends, but also reach out and let people know that you need help. Even if you have the kids, let's say you're the party that has the kids most of the time. If you are struggling, especially to keep the mood up and that the festivities going for your children, but you're struggling, make sure you reach out to family or friends to just take a break if you need to.
I want to say, we mentioned, I think it was Asa, perhaps we talked about, communicating right away and starting to think forward. I think our natural reaction again is avoidance, and we want to wait till the last minute. And I think I got to believe it's important to start planning. You may be alone for the holidays. It may be by agreement. It may be that, okay, you've given your spouse Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. I have to plan ahead, start thinking about, okay, is there other family I can go to? Is there other friends? Because being alone obviously is certainly one of those things that's just going to compound their problem, their emotional issues that they're having.
Absolutely. And I think part of that too is they may not even know that you're spending it alone that year. Maybe your ex has the kids, or maybe you don't have kids at all, but you haven't told very many people that you're separated, or they just assume that you've found something else to do. Reach out and don't be afraid you never know. They may not know you are waiting for an invite to that party. So reach out and find out, what are you guys doing? Or let them know, hey, I don't have any plans yet. Where is the family, or where are your friends gathering during that time? I think it's important too to do something that maybe you haven't done or been able to do while you were in the relationship. If it's just a trip up north, if it's camping, if it's something that you enjoy, but you weren't able to do it again while you were in the relationship for whatever reason, do something that brings you joy. Obviously, law abiding, stay safe, and make sure that whatever you're doing is not going to affect your case further if you're still in the litigation process. But do something that maybe you haven't been able to do before, and that does take some planning, and it could get you excited as well. So if you start the planning a couple weeks ahead, a month ahead, for that trip, or for that just something you're going to do for the day, it really could bring up your spirit during this time.
Keep submitting your questions in the Q&A section. We have those now. We'll get to those here shortly and try to give you some direction. at least some guidance on what the law says and kind of our collective experience. So you can submit those now in the Q&A section. Just give us your first name and city or state that you're in. That way we can direct it, if we can, to one of our panel members appropriately. So do that now. We'll be getting to the Q&A section shortly. So Jessica, I know I've talked a lot about social media in general in divorce or modification or just whatever it may be if you're having issues in your life. How do you feel about social media, especially over the holidays?
So the general rule, as I'm sure you've heard, whether from us or from others, is just to stay away from social media during this process, especially during the holidays. What happens is we start to compare ourselves to others and what they're doing, even others that are divorced or going through a divorce, oh, well, they're doing this, or they seem so happy, or they're able to work it out. And you end up comparing yourself, which only brings on more added stress and, adds to that pain that you're already going through. So just stay away from social media. And sometimes your ex may even be the type that posts more during this time just to, try and hurt you in this process. So if you're off of it and you're not paying attention to it, then whatever they're trying to do to hurt you won't work. So we advise staying away from social media altogether. Obviously, unless it's an invite, check your invites. If you may never know, somebody might have invited you to something on Facebook or other apps, and you don't want to miss that.
So a suggestion, I'm interested what your thoughts are when guys are communicating, particularly about the time that they may be spending, trying to arrange for pickup times or custody times, and they don't have an order. And that occurs a lot, especially in the beginning of the case. Suggestions, should they be very specific? Should they be in writing? What should they be doing and thinking about if they're arranging for times, pickups, FaceTimes, whatever it may be, phone calls, gift exchange? How specific, what should they be thinking about when they're making those arrangements?
Absolutely, as specific as possible. That avoids any confusion, miscommunication, and in writing. It doesn't mean on a piece of paper. It could be an email, it could be a text. Just make sure that the plans are clear. So you will be picking up on this day, at this time, at this location, and then where the drop off is or the next exchange. Also, phone calls, it's a good point. Sometimes, parties don't even live in the same state. So make sure you plan and coordinate around those FaceTime calls, because what we get a lot is, oh, I tried calling and she didn't answer, and I called 5 times and she never answered. But during that time, it was the middle of their family get together. So reach out ahead of time and say, hey, I'd like to choose a time and give yourself some wiggle room, maybe like a 2-hour period. So between 1 and 3, I'd like to be able to call and talk to the children. And that's the best advice is make sure that it's as specific as possible so that you don't run into those arguments or unnecessary fights at the end of the day.
So Marilynn, a lot of guys don't pull the trigger during the holiday season to file for divorce for a number of valid reasons. And I've always talked about the cyclical nature, the more predictable nature of family law and divorce. We see the filings start to almost come to a halt and really significantly slow down until the day after Christmas. It is that 3 or 4 day period. It's just a huge filing increase. People wait for whatever reason. Should they not do anything? Should they be proactive? What should guys be thinking about? If they haven't filed, they need to file. They want to file, but they just haven't done it. What should they be thinking about doing?
Thank you, Scott. You are correct. Being proactive and pragmatic is crucial. The interesting part of this is you don't want to tip your hand to your spouse that you want to seek a divorce. There's probably tension, so you can start by gathering documentation. Finances and documentation is part of the litigation process. If you want, you could use an excuse like you want to get ready for your taxes, but collecting those bank statements, the credit card statements, your W-2s, any 401k statements, your lawyer will thank you. Being organized is very important during the process. If you've spoken to an attorney or you've decided you want to get divorced and you're going to make that first filing after the new year, While you're at home on the holidays, start getting organized. It's only going to help you during the process, and it's also going to help you organize for yourself where your finances are and what some of the areas when you talk to your lawyer are going to be in a dispute or not in dispute
Yeah,
financially.
it's some of the most, I think, organized clients. I think back about, we've talked about this for months and months in our virtual town hall about being proactive and saving yourself perhaps some attorney's fees and money. I've had clients come in with spreadsheets and all the statements tabbed in a folder or in a binder by month, by credit card, by mortgage statement, by retirement, and it's all there. And then a thumb drive with a spreadsheet, with everything on there. It's amazing. You actually can do yourself good by being that proactive. Your attorney is going to have to do some of that legwork to create the spreadsheet, to kind of log the assets. You have most states will require a disclosure of all your assets. Maybe we won't have to originally go get a subpoena to get those assets and the values and the monthly statements. That can't be undersold or understated, the importance of being proactive, but also doing it in a manner that doesn't raise suspicion. Because we've talked about filing first, and I think that's always a key strategically in many instances. So, but I think as guys are listening, they're thinking now they're getting more stressed, more tense, um, and the wonderful thing about stress in this is that they're not the only one likely going through it, right?
Absolutely. There are others probably in your circle of friends, or maybe where you gather and go to church, or maybe your soccer team dads that have gone through this. Being proactive and collecting your data is stressful. The luxury we have today is we could be walking around the mall and have our phone in our hands and start saving those PDFs from whatever statements we have. And so it's not as if you need to hide away in your home office and spend 4 hours collecting data. You can do it little pieces at the time. You probably know someone who's gone through a divorce, and it's okay probably to ask one of your friends, how did you gather that information? Because sometimes we forget there's other things. You might have a timeshare, you might have a vacation home in Colorado. You forgot about the camper that you park at the KOA. So even just thinking about your assets and in your mind making a file folder of what needs to happen will help you going forward in this process.
I think as you go through, we talk about keeping busy, being proactive with your kids, trying to release some of the tension. Some of the best advice we were dealing with a psychologist in a case, in a custody evaluation. And she said, you don't always have to have something to do, and because we had a client who felt like every weekend or every other weekend, he had to fill the entire time with activities, going to this place, going to that place, and changing it up. And I think that was the best piece of advice, because he thought sometimes it's okay to just have downtime, together time, sit there, perhaps do nothing. I said, I was talking to a friend the other day, and I said, he and I can sit in the same room and we don't have to say a word to each other for a half an hour. And we actually enjoy that time just together. And it's funny, we laugh because a lot of people aren't that way, but I think it's a good focus is to try to think about that. And the reason I suggested and mentioned the psychologist, and I'm curious your thought is, I've told many clients, take care of you first. Go get help, go see a social worker, go see a counselor, whatever it is, a psychologist, and learn how to deal with the new situation, the new environment, right?
Absolutely. Self-care is seems to be labeled sometimes as selfish, but it's not. For parents, they do need to recharge their batteries. And the fact is, everyone in the house can feel the tension. If you can feel the tension, if you've made that decision, rest assured your spouse and your children can feel the tension as well. So you might need some downtime, and that could be a long shower, or it could be going into your bedroom and asking your children to come in with you and talk about something that you haven't ever talked about. When it comes to always having to have something planned, if you walk into the kitchen and your spouse is tense, you can always say, hey, kids, let's build a fort. A flat sheet and a couple pillows, and you have a whole new world. And any of these activities can be spontaneous. It's hard to imagine that you can be spontaneous when there's a blizzard outside, especially if you want to go and see the lights or go to Starbucks and get hot cocoa, but you can do that at home. Dads don't always realize, like, I bet there's little marshmallows somewhere in the house and that you could make a new tradition of let's make cocoa and make a fort. So
Yeah.
you can do self-care, or you can just be spontaneous with your children to break any tension that you have.
And I think, again, we mentioned it earlier, and keep track of what's going on, a day in the life. It's always helpful to give that to your attorney to talk about your involvement and how you're, with your kids, because you hope you never get to that argument about your involvement and who's the primary custodial parent or who's the nurturer. But it's always good to kind of record. At the end of the day, just journal and make sure those things are there. So I think that's key. Grown-up topics, they aren't always to be shared with your kids, right?
Absolutely. Grown-up topics are not for your children, and they're not really for your friends and family and these type matters. Nobody wants to really talk about politics and religion. That's, we know that, but we forget that we shouldn't be talking about the size of the credit card bill. How much did a toy cost? Which attorney do you think is best? Who did what to whom? All of those should be diffused. Grown-up topics are not to be brought up. Children should not be worried about what the bill was at the grocery store for the turkey, nor how much someone spent on the new soccer shoes under the Christmas tree. So do your best to remember to rise above, change the topic to something that's more upbeat, and you can save those grown-up topics for after the new year when they're appropriate with the appropriate people.
It's so tempting to share the reason why things didn't work out, or the reason why you didn't get a present, or you didn't show up that day. And obviously those things are not your fault, and you want to be right, and you want to have your kids look at you like it's not their fault or your fault or those types of things. So I think it's important. So, all right, submit your questions in the Q&A section. We'll do those right now, and we'll get to your questions. So let's go ahead and go right to that. Let me pull up some of the questions here. Let's go to Niecie, and I know it's a California question, Niecie, but the question really is the financial situation split 50-50 in California? And I know we don't have a California licensed attorney, and they happen to be, I think, a community property state, but you can just talk about typically what happens in Minnesota with what is the starting point for judges in splitting finances.
Sure, Scott. As you indicated, I practice in Minnesota. I don't practice in California. Regarding personal property and property division in general, the courts generally try to do what's considered equitable or fair. In states like Minnesota, that is typically a 50-50 split. In some states, it is actually determined to be a 50-50 split. So it varies state by state, but approximately equal is a fair answer.
I think it's worth going to a consultation, because there are some states that value the property at the time of filing. And so I think that's key to make sure you get to an attorney, get the right advice, especially in California. We have offices throughout the state. So Jessica, Timothy in North Carolina says, I've been separated and divorced since August of 2016. My ex and I have 2 kids, both over 18. I am paying spousal support. What steps can I take to stop paying spousal support? I've done a little research on the subject and have not found anything useful. So I know it's North Carolina, but you can talk about Arizona about spousal support.
Sure. So the first thing you want to do is take a look at what your actual decree states. Is it a modifiable spousal award, or is it non-modifiable? And then my best advice would be meet with someone from our office that's near you, an office near you, for a consult. Have them review the decree, see what options you have. I know in Arizona, if there's a change in circumstance regarding your finances, and if it is modifiable pursuant to the decree, then you would be able to file a petition to modify with the court. But generally in most states, you would have to initiate that filing. And if the other party agrees, in most cases they don't, but if they agree, then it should be pretty simple. If they don't agree, then you would start the petition or the motion to modify that spousal award would be the first step. And we'd really encourage you to meet with someone to discuss your options.
Great. Anonymous person says, I've been having 34% custody with our son, and I honestly feel that I've been trying to progress in life in order to provide for our son, but I see my baby mama doing the opposite. I still see her in the same situation. Last court order was that she had to find a full-time job. She still doesn't work a full-time job. I'm a full-time employee. The only way to see my son are on my days off. What can I do in this situation for it? I imagine he's talking about trying to get more time since you can only see him days off. Is there any way to modify in that situation?
Thank you, Scott. That's kind of I think of a two-part answer. One, do we want to modify and go after more parenting time with dad? And two, how can we suggest and force mom to find a full-time job? So I would encourage anyone to make a consultation with one of our offices near them. In regard to more time, if there's a change in circumstances, then by all means, we would probably encourage to file a petition and look towards what that change of circumstances would be in your jurisdiction to encourage for you to have more time. In regard to mom not finding a full-time job, I would speak with your attorney and ask if you could possibly put forth a motion that mom has to at least produce to the court 10 applications or 10 internet applications. If there's an order that was absolutely set and mom has not followed it, then there are steps where you could request that she is in violation of a court order. These, of course, are based on after seeing what documentation you have, but you would need to meet with a Cordell attorney to review what you have and take your goals and put them towards a legal strategy to achieve them.
So to stay with you on that same topic, one similar question deals with someone whose work schedule also has changed and now interferes with what the order says, and that now they have to work on days in which they were supposed to get custody. Particularly, it says, I have 58 hours a week, but my schedules change. I have to work earlier on the days that I get custody. So now it makes less time with his son. So I imagine a similar situation, you could file a modification based upon perhaps if it's a permanent change or likely a long-term change, not something that's just a short-term change.
Absolutely. Thank you, Scott. Yes, first and foremost, I would consider that a change in circumstances. So you have a couple of options. You could file a motion for a temporary change in the custody parenting time arrangement, or you could find out if that is indeed a permanent change with your employer. Because of the pandemic, we all have somewhat varying work schedules, and many folks are working different shifts and extra shifts. Don't know if that's going to be permanent or not. So meeting with your attorney and putting forth a motion, because you could request makeup parenting time or indeed just a change in the schedule so that ensure that you are engaging in your parenting time with your child. I would not encourage any father or any spouse to not exercise their parenting time, because once you back away from it, then it's kind of hard to gain back that time that you've agreed to give up.
Yeah. So let me turn to Asa. Asa out of New York. The question is, why does the family court not recognize stay-at-home dads and give them the same rights in court as a stay-at-home mom? Why is it so hard to get 50-50 in New York?
Well, that's a really great question. And I'm sorry for what experience it sounds like you're having. But your question is exactly why Cordell and Cordell exists as a firm. There is still a bias. We do everything we can as advocates for men to fight against that bias and show courts that these antiquated views of gender roles and parenting are not necessarily what's going on in each situation. We have some success, a lot of success in advocating for our clients in cases where they've been traditionally a stay-at-home dad and making sure that can continue. And we do everything we can to advocate for our clients. My advice to you would be to make sure you have a strong advocate fighting for you in court. This is all that we do here. And if you have a Cordell office near you, I'd encourage you to talk to an attorney there or find another attorney that you're comfortable with who can advocate strongly. The laws in New York State are gender neutral. You have to have a strong advocate in court to make sure you get a fair decision.
Niecie, question comes in from Florida. My wife filed for divorce a month and a half ago. I lived in the same home until a week ago when I found out she has been dating someone for the past 7 months. I want her here with us for the holidays, but she doesn't want to because of what she's been caught doing. My mother is visiting for a week during Christmas and hasn't seen the kids in 3 years. My wife put in a request through her attorney for the kids that week. What are my options?
Well, first of all, Tim, congratulations on being the better person and trying to create as normal of a holiday for your children as possible. That's a good first step. Since your spouse won't cooperate with that and she's made a request for the holiday parenting time, It depends on the jurisdiction. In Minnesota, it would be too late to file a motion or do something through the courts. So what you would want to do is you would want to work with your attorney on getting a reasonable response to that request. With the situation with your mom being in town, obviously that's a really important relationship for the children, and the time should be maximized for the children with your mother. There should be some time for your spouse with the children. So I would try to work out a compromise position. But ultimately, with you being in the home, you have a strong negotiating stance, and you should try to take advantage of that and work this out with your attorney.
All right, Jessica, JC has a question out of Maryland. And the question is, how long does a PDL, Pendite Lite judgment in my favor last typically? What questions would opposing counsel and the judge generally ask of me? So I assume from that, Jessica, is that there's a pending divorce, there was a temporary order in place with a judgment, no final order from what I can tell. I guess the question is how long does that PDL judgment last, albeit in Maryland? If you have the similar, I can answer it from Missouri, but if you have it in Arizona.
Yeah, thank you. As he mentioned, I do practice in Arizona, so I'd encourage you to speak with an attorney in your area to ask specifically if there's a general time frame. But the best answer I can give you is until further court order, and it should be specific on your the order that you're following now. If there's a time frame, if it's silent as to how long it should last, it's generally until further court order. And so if you don't have a final trial set, if it is a temporary order, the best advice would to be get back into court as soon as possible. If there's a modification that you wanted to make or needed to make, and you met the criteria for filing to modify that, that may be an option, but ultimately it's generally until further court order, which could be a final trial.
Cooper has a question. My ex gets our son on Christmas Day this year. He is 5 and has let a few things slip to me recently that mom says her Christmas is going to be much more fun than being at dad's house, so I should be happy. I don't want to make a big deal out of nothing if she didn't say things like that to him, but if she is, then it's a big problem. I've never badmouthed my ex to my son, and I think I deserve better. Should I address it with my ex, or can it go badly if I do it?
Well, it depends on the situation and how communication is in general with your ex. I think that it is a wise decision to talk with her about it, but that conversation shouldn't be, I heard you said. A more appropriate way to handle that conversation is focusing on your child's feelings, because whether mom said it or not, this is what the child believes happened. So talk with your ex about that and just explain the importance you place on having all conversations with the child being positive. Having that conversation is a good way to keep communication open in general. And while it may not go well, that's the point where you can then step back and decide, do you need to consult with an attorney to address this concern? Or do you need to take some other further action? If the conversation doesn't go well, it could be an indication or a sign of other problems in your co-parenting relationship that need to be addressed as well. But if that conversation does go well, that's huge. And that's a great success, and your child will benefit.
Asa, kind of a follow-up question from someone who were talking about trying to get more time with their work schedule. They had about 34% of the time. The one concern this gentleman has is he's paying a relatively lower amount of child support. And since the divorce, he was promoted and is being paid much more money. His fear is going back to court. He may, win the battle, lose the war, get hit with more child support. What are you seeing? I know I directed this question to you about New York 50-50. What are you seeing, in terms of the chances of getting 50-50, and what impact does that have on child support, especially with someone who may be making more?
That's a great question. And of course, specific to New York law, the custody arrangement is only going to have somewhat of an impact on the amount of child support you pay. In New York, it's almost an all or nothing state. If you have 50-50 custody and one parent makes significantly more money than the other parent, the presumption is that the more moneyed parent is still going to pay the full amount of child support, regardless of 50-50 custody. Now, if it's very close, if you have one party who's making within 10% of the other and they're relatively similar and you have 50-50 custody, the courts can deviate. But more often, we do see courts just ordering the full amount on child support. Now, there's still a lot that can be done, and it's important to consult with your attorney, and every case is different. But if the increase in income is going to be significant, it could have an ultimate impact on the amount of child support you're going to pay. So I think in that situation, it's very important to speak to an attorney and make sure you see all the potential outcomes before anything happens.
Let's see, Jessica, Matt recently separated early this year. He and his wife are trying to figure out the holidays, and they're talking about switching off year by year. But Matt would rather each get 1 week since they have 2 weeks off of school. They're trying to work towards a joint shared custody agreement, but he would like to make sure that he can do something like that where it's each get a week, during the holiday break. Matt's question is how does he kind of go about that to make sure that the decisions are fair, that he can try to get to that? How does he position himself appropriately?
Sure. We see that a lot. Generally, winter breaks for children that are in school are 2 weeks. So the first week would encompass Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. The second week would have New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. So generally, you can discuss language, and again, you want to be very specific, days, times, locations of the exchange. But sometimes what we would put is the day the children release from school or the day after the children release from school at noon for the next 7 consecutive days, so long as it includes Christmas, like December 26th is the earliest you would exchange for the second week. So the first week would start the day the children get out of school to 7 days later. And that usually falls pretty close to a easy split. But you're welcome to do anything you want similar to that, as long as you have those days specific where, 7 and 7, generally parties are able to come to some agreements on that. There's, depending on your local rules and the courts near you. I know our Superior Court in Maricopa County has forms online as well and suggestions. So we'd encourage you to reach out to an attorney in your area with one of our offices to discuss that. And we can go over a very specific parenting plan with you as well, even if that's all you're coming in for the consult to discuss.
And the last question we have available for the day, I'm going to go to Niecie, and it really is just a question about how courts deal with custody issues for unmarried parents, the kids. What do how does that work? Obviously, paternity question. How does that work for you in Minnesota?
Sure. So custody cases for unmarried parties have some special challenges. While as a parent, you maybe have lived with your child for years and you've been actively, you're the child's dad. Under the law, you are not the father until the court decides you're the father. And you have no rights. You don't have any rights to custody. You don't have any rights to parenting time. Sometimes your only right feels like you have the right to pay child support. So it's really important you talk with an attorney early, so that way that you can take quick action. Until you get a court order that protects your rights to your child, you're basically faced with dealing the arbitrary whims of the mom. And if the mom has, it works with you and you have a good relationship, that might go okay, but it's important to legally protect your relationship with your child.
Thanks, Niecie. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining. Reach out to one of the attorneys across the country. We have offices around the United States, including the United Kingdom. You can give us a call at 866-DADS-LAW if you want to schedule a consultation. You do it in person on the phone or via Zoom or WebEx virtually, just like this. It's up to you how you'd like that to be handled. You can follow us on the web at cordell.com and across social media. You can check out our YouTube channel and check out our past virtual town halls. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. If you want to do that, you'll be alerted every time it drops, twice every week. So until then, have a great week and a great holiday season.